Good evening, everybody. I warmly welcome everyone to this first book club meet of this year, 2024. It's a monthly meeting which we hold here. Usually I choose the subject for discussion is usually either a book on Pondicherry or with a local or a book by the local writer. This evening we have Iffat Nawaz with us, who is actually a local writer. She has been here, she's been living here for 5 years, so I consider her a local writer. We will be talking about her book, Shurjo's Clan, as you can see. This book has already been around. This is not a book launch. This book was already launched some time ago, and Iffat has been going to attend several lit fests around the country, and also outside the country. So this is not really a book launch. So I can tell you that this book is available on Amazon as well as at the Focus Bookshop in Pondichéry if you want to buy it. For those who have already read it, it's wonderful because like that you'll be able to ask questions pertinently about the book itself. So let me first introduce Iffat to you. Iffat Nawaz was born in Dhaka, Bangladesh, and grew up in the USA. Her debut novel, Shurjo's Clan, was published by Penguin Random House, Vintage, in November 2022, and shortlisted for the Best First Book Award by Tata Little Life, which is actually the Mumbai Literature Festival. Iffat worked for over a decade in humanitarian and development projects in the USA, Asia, and Africa. In 2016, she published Untold Stories of Tangwar Haur, a collection of true accounts of a local community that lives in a water basin at the border of India and Bangladesh. This was commissioned by the International Union for Conservation of Nature. Iffat's weekly column, Under a Different Sky, ran for 10 years in Bangladesh's English newspaper, The Daily Star. Her writing has appeared in the Huffington Post, Zuban Books, Himal South Asia, Cosmopolitan, and the Indian Quarterly. Since 2018, Iffat has been living in Pondichéry, where she is devoted to the teachings of Sri Aurobindo. I'll begin by asking a few questions to Iffat. I forgot my question paper there. Anyway, I'll start with let me get my question paper. I'll try and remember what I had asked her. The first thing I wanted to ask her was if she could tell us, can you tell us something about this weekly column that you used to write, and which was published for a decade. So can you tell us something about that?
Sure. Thank you for being here on a Sunday night for a book talk, first of all, and thank you for the lovely introduction. It's an absolute honor to be here. About the column that ran for 10 years on the Daily Star, it was called Under a Different Sky. So as you can imagine, it was written not under the same sky as Bangladesh. So I was living in the US at the time, and a lot of this book talks about it, and it explains this intoxicated feeling that Bangladesh kind of pregnants us with as soon as we are born. And I was born in the late 70s, where is there an echo?
Yes.
Yeah.
May I use yours?
Better, right? Yes. Okay. So, I was born in the late 70s in Bangladesh and moved to the US in the early 90s. And it was not, I didn't want to move basically. And there was this longing that I felt constantly for the land that I left behind, especially because it was such a newly liberated country still, 7, 8 years after I was born. Before I was born, the country was liberated. So we were always just, this is the best place and we have to build this, and our parents gave us this really magical feeling all the time. So leaving all that magic and moving to the US felt like I was missing out on everything, It was like, you taught us this and now you have brought us here. So I tried to keep that feeling inside alive as long as I could until I moved back to Bangladesh for work for 5 years. Then it transformed into something else, that magic. So this column was born out of that longing and wanting to connect with the nation which I was not living in and not visiting very often. And it had a lot to do with, there were about 700 words every Tuesday. And first it started with my life in US, maybe like slice of life kind of thing. Then it turned into these sort of very subtle psychological spaces, missing that rickshaw ride and remembering the back of a rickshawala going, sweating, and like that memory. And then it could be a memory of the monsoon rain. It could be a memory of, being middle class, what it meant in Bangladesh, and all of that. So it was very, diverse in its way, and I had all the freedom after a while. They liked the column. But I had no idea if anybody read it because I lived in the US. Once in a while I'll get emails. But then when I visited Bangladesh, it was really wonderful because I had a lot of teenage readers, but as well as 20s, 30s, and 40s. And once the book got launched, a lot of them came for the launch in Dhaka. So I was, it was a big, a very grateful feeling for me to have that. But it made me a writer, absolutely.
Yes, that's the reason why I asked you this, because the first novel, which is so much appreciated, cannot come from someone who didn't write before that. There must have been a lot of writing before, even though it was non-fiction, for a fiction book to come out. Most people think that, I'll just take my laptop and I'll start typing and a book will come out of it like that. But in fact, there's a lot of work and experience and writing before that. My second question is this. The background of this book is the years that led up to the liberation of Bangladesh, to the birth of Bangladesh. But that story, those who don't know that bit of history, probably won't be able to see that through your novel. Because even though it's a personal story, which you recount, between the lines and sometimes quite in front, is this story of this terrible time that Bangladesh had to pass through to be free, to be itself. I was already about 12 years old at that time, so I have memories of people telling me what was happening and how traumatic it was. But I wonder if your young readers now would know anything about it. So can you please tell me what feedback you've got from your readers? Can they actually go that deep inside and feel that story?
Thank you. I think that's a great question. And in fact, there is a backstory to this. Because the reason why I wanted to write this book was actually for that generation who did not get what we got. We didn't inherit it the way we did. Fortunately or unfortunately, the war is still very celebrated in Bangladesh. And it was fun in the 80s, it was nice and celebratory in the 90s, it kind of still had its glow. But the kids who were born in the 90s rolls their eyes because it's just flaunted too much. Everywhere we look, it's, either a picture of Sheikh Mujib or Sheikh Hasina, who's our Prime Minister, and it's great, but it's a bit pushed. And the thing that we thought was a religion, know your history, memorize everything. To them, they also memorized it, but they knew absolutely everything because parents just stuffed it, and not in the same manner that it was given to us. It was a different kind of stuffing. It was like, we must know, you must know, and so everything becomes like a dogma, right? When it becomes that way, the magic leaves. So they had a very different. They knew the background, they know the background, but they turn away from it because it's no longer that magical feeling that I felt or my generation felt. The reason I said this is related is in 2016 in Dhaka, the year after I had left my job at USA and moved back to US in 2015. In 2016 there was an ISIS attack at one of these bakeries that were more frequented by foreigners and people like me, friends, etc. And they were boys who were 16, 17, 18, 19-year-olds, basically the generation that we're talking about. And they grew up in the same soil as me, as us, yet they left, they went and joined ISIS, they came back and they killed their own people. And to us, it was the biggest shock. How could that happen? When did religion come into this in Bengal, that, Bangladesh, that if we fought for the language and the culture, when did this happen? And a lot of us, my friends and I, we really felt we failed. I don't have a child. A lot of us didn't choose to have children. We did our own thing. But those who did have children, still there's a gap that didn't get bridged in that process, and we got too self-focused perhaps. And so I wanted to write something where it wasn't about repeating what they know. And this book doesn't, because you can Google if you don't know something. It only sprinkles stuff with certain dates and certain events that people already know of, that the generation definitely know about. But it talks about the angst and the trauma and the grief that they also feel and they want to run away from, or they want to maybe idealize for the wrong reasons. So, that was the way I wanted to bridge it. And also the message is that we need to move forward. We can't be stuck in this so long as we have.
I meant the Indian readers.
The Indian readers, and this is Bengal. I think similarly, the Indian readers as well. I mean, in a way, 47 is not much different than this, right? I mean, we were all, kind of brought into the world of shadows and light and celebrated, and so much trauma still unhealed, so many things still conditioned mind saying this country's bad, that is our enemy. And I feel like the kids that I've met in the fest here, or readers who have reached out to me, they're tired of it. So one of the ways I wanted this book to have no religion, so nobody has a last name. I've been asked this, why? Because I don't want that to be a part of this. I don't think the new generation wants that. I didn't want to point fingers, so there's a war with Bangladesh and Pakistan, but I mentioned Pakistan as little as possible, because I think it's time we stop doing that. So I think those things were appreciated, and certain conditioning that we keep on repeating in a loop, that these kids want to get out from also. I wanted to bring that in. So I think in India as well as Bangladesh, and even in the US a little bit, I got responses from the younger generation that were we're having conversations, and that's nice.
I'll ask you more questions after which, if I will read from the book, after which I'll ask you to ask the questions. My third question was, everyone knows that the first novel is very often autobiographical. So how much of Shurjo is Iffat and how much isn't?
So I say 25% because this question has been asked at every interview and LitFest. And so my two uncles did die in the war. I did grow up in a house with their pictures hanging, staring at me from the study no matter where I looked, and all of that. And bits and pieces are there. But it's not just my story. In fact, every family had lost somebody in Bangladesh. It was a genocide. So every family had framed photos like that. And every family had memorized their history of how their so and so died, uncle, aunt. There were so many rapes and war children as well, so people knew stories. Some hid it if it was embarrassing for them. Some talked about it if it was maybe talked about it too much, as an identity. This is who I am. So in that way, it is 25%. The rest is imagined or borrowed.
And my last question, because now that I have said she's a local writer, she lives here, so naturally I want to know the reason why she's here is because she's following Sri Aurobindo's spiritual path. So I have asked her, what was it precisely in the philosophy of the spiritual path of Sri Aurobindo and the mother which actually attracted you to them, to the point where you wanted to live here?
So, in short, a very quick story of why I came. I was working for the two refugee crises right before coming, one in Nigeria with the Boko Haram, the displaced people in Borno. Then right after, I was recruited for the Rohingya crisis for 6 months. And I was really, crisis after crisis, but it's like really a lot. And in the meantime, I was really wanting to write this book as well. That was being carried, couldn't write. I was breaking apart, acting a bit dysfunctional, like all people start acting, I think, when they're working in crisis. And I wanted a break. In the middle of all this, I was doing a lot of Vipassana meditation, those 10-day silent meditations that is quite popular in the US, so I started there. And so there was a spiritual calling, but I was not sure what that was, because it's always so personal. And during the last crisis in Cox's Bazar, just up north from the shore here, I met a journalist from Al Jazeera who was working there. He was from Delhi. And we became friends and we worked together a bit, and he left. And he was a surfer. I knew he lived in India and he went to places to surf. And so when I decided to resign in 2018, I didn't want to go back to America. I didn't want to I didn't want to stay on Bangladesh. I wanted to come to India because my ancestors are from here. I always wanted to experience it a bit more. And so I wrote to this fellow, his name is Maurya Gautam. I haven't seen him since, but amazing how these people come right at the right time. And so I asked him, do you know a place near a sea where I can park for 6 months and write a book and figure this whole spiritual thing, whatever it is. And I thought Goa. I mentioned Goa. I loved Goa before when I went. And he, 2 days later, sent me a picture of a place in Quiet Beach. And it was perfect. It looked right. And so I came. And it was 24th April when I walked into the ashram, not knowing anything about the significance of the day. There was a darshan day. And then Sri Aurobindo's books came. And there were lots of questions with Vipassana I was having. A lot of answers were found. In the meantime, I was finishing my first draft, which was super heavy and sad and angry, and the protagonist had 6 arms. They were baggages. They were not where she was a goddess, but she was really weighed down. And it was another war story that would make people very sad. Once I finished, I was visiting the Samadhi every day then. I went to the Samadhi and it felt like I just, the message I felt was simplify this. Why are you writing another heavy book? And then I froze for about a year. And because of the reading of Sri Aurobindo and understanding how atavism is something we need to get over, that was how the whole thing shifted to Shurjo. Shurjo means sunflower, and the mother's significance for that flower is consciousness turns towards light. So I named her Shurjo on purpose, so I myself would remember through writing this book that she has to constantly, even if she's looking down in the darkness, she eventually has to turn to the light. Because I had to. I wasn't when I started. So that was basically it's Mother Sri Aurobindo's blessings and my understanding of it that made this book.
So now I'll ask Iffat to read a few pages from her book.
So I'll read 3 different parts. First will be the beginning, and then a bit from the middle, 1 paragraph, and 1 paragraph from the last part. There are 3 sections, so a little bit from each. So the first chapter is called 1 1/2. When Shurjo was young, Her family lived in an asymmetrical house that held two parallel worlds. They resided in both, with their steps following a specific rhythm to walk in and out of these dual realities. The house was built during the British era and stood in an old part of Dhaka called Ganderia. It was originally called Grand Area, but the tongue of time had robbed the name of its luxury, turning it into gibberish. In addition to first and second floors, Shurjo's house also had rooms on the 1.5 and 2.5 floors. The family's heirlooms, memories, and secrets were stored in those in-betweens. Shurjo's bedroom was on floor 1.5, a landing that had been made into a small room. Her parents slept on the second floor and grandparents on the first. Shurjo was put there because she could not decide which set of adults she wanted to spend her nights with. They had humored her and come up with this in-between solution. This put Shurjo at an equal distance from the two couples and closest to the treasures of her family's past. During the day, Shurjo's family abided by the same world that most people lived in. After dark, when everyone was back home and the century-old wooden front gate had been locked, they switched to the other side. Death did not exist on the evening side, and additional family members joined the dinner table. Shurjo's uncles, who had been martyred in the country's liberation war, fought over the best piece of fish. Her father comfortably slipped into the position of the middle child, freed of his daytime role as the head of the household, a sole living child of his parents. Shurjo was either completely ignored or overwhelmingly doted on by her visiting uncles and her maternal grandmother, who usually showed up after dinner to chew her bitter leaf in the company of Shurjo's mother. In the day side of the world, she had killed herself by jumping into a well. So this is the first couple of paragraphs. Now I'll read from another portion, and it talks about the grandmother I just spoke about who jumped into the well. Her name is Chantori, and she was 18 when she passed. And she ends up having, this is Murshidabad in West Bengal in pre-1947, and she's about 13-14-year-old girl, and she has this love for the river. You know, she loves rivers, and a specific river, Bhagirathi, and she has this relationship with it where she can understand its language. I'm going to read a bit of what she felt with the river. The river's language was not what most people perceived it to be. The brushing of the wind against the surface of the water. No. Nor was it the sound of the water flowing over rocks. Those were the superficial moss of the river. Its language lay underneath it all, 3 feet below the surface, where the waves could not be felt. This was where the river picked up a crisp tone, a clear thought. This was where it carried everyone's secrets. Chantori heard it all, the songs of fishermen, the tears from widows' lonely paths, the tinkling anklets of young dreamers, the ageless devotion of lovers, the melted clay of the previous year's goddesses, the legacy of Murshidabad, with swamp and sand in the Bhagirathi steppes. All stories were found there. Some came flowing from nearby, while others were more foreign. They joined from afar, mountains, flatlands, forests, small and big towns. Eventually, they all intermingled. The river told Santori at least 1,000 tales, and along with them brought news of the future. And now a bit about the Dhaka monsoon, my last little bit that I'll read, just because I love Dhaka monsoon. Bangladesh monsoon, I should say. But Dhaka spoke a different language. It did not allow matters of the heart to lie forgotten on the back burner. Dhaka tarried as its inhabitants sat by their windows or lay in their beds, making the same comfort food of khichdi day after day. Life paused was while the city took large sips from hot cups of tea, the steam rising to mingle with their wet eyelashes. The rain was a potion that erased bad memories, regrets, grief. It was the traditional taka, a yearly purge to leave the soul slate clean. Shurjo invited the monsoon as a healer. An unnameable loneliness had greeted her on her return to Dhaka. She could not tell if she craved the memories of her past or the realities of an era she had outgrown. The monsoon observed it all. Old invisible riddles circled her body. The dim light of the sun barely entered her eyes. Everything felt soft like mud. The pages of books, the soles of shoes, her own body, her mind, her breath. Shurjo had so much to offer to the downpour. She lay motionless, letting the smell of the wet earth soothe old wounds.
So now
It's your turn to ask questions. Yes.
Hi. I have a question about the writing process. When you said there was that year where you froze, did you know as a writer that this could be part of the process, or did you feel what has happened to this book, maybe this is the right book? I'm curious to know what your experience with that was.
I did not know it was part of the process.
just a moment. So
Yeah,
let her
very
repeat the
needed,
question.
I think,
Yes.
for the recording.
Yes.
Thank you. Hi, my name is Kerry. So it's a question about the process. In that year where you said that you realised that the manuscript that you were writing was quite heavy and then you froze, did you know that as a creative and as a writer that was part of the process and what you needed would come eventually? Or did that make you question whether you were writing the right book, whether you were a writer? I'm curious to know what your experience of that was.
I felt like a fraud, because I had announced to my friends, my family, I'd left everyone behind, moved to this place, and I said, I'm writing, and I was not. And I did not know if it was a part of the process. I would have a chapter, 1 month, and then lose interest in it, wrong way, dead ends. And then even I thought, okay, maybe it was just a personal healing journey, and I just needed to put all these heaviness onto paper that I could or could not publish maybe, but what good will it do? And so that went on. I was trying to find a new identity even, and I thought, okay, maybe those 700 words column were just, like a fling with writing, and this is not who I am. I'm not going to ever finish a novel or even approach one. But it was only during COVID, in that quietness, that this happened, and so, one good thing came out of COVID for me is Shurjo's plan. But, I think it took a lot of courage to go back to it. Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Rina, would you like to ask a question?
First of all, congratulations on a very beautiful cover. I love the cover, the bloom, and then the
Yes, graphic designer Penguin. She read the book and came up with it. Yes, I love it.
It's very befitting. But I have to. Let me ask the first one. How long? You said you started in 2018 and then you froze and then you recommenced. And you were done with the first draft, which was too heavy. So when you rewrote, did you have to trash major parts of the book? Or did you work on the first draft, just clipping away?
None of the first draft is this. It's a completely different story, in fact. So, very little, I should say. I shouldn't say none, but very little is this. What the first draft did for me was help me with character development. So yes, there were still uncles and aunts and many more characters. And it sort of, I saw good, bad sides or villains, and so I could cut out things that were unnecessary. So it was sort of like putting everything out and then picking what I wanted. But the writing, the voice had changed in that 1 year for me. So then to take something from that past that I had moved forward didn't feel right. it wouldn't flow into this, so then I rewrote, or I wrote from a different place, basically, so like that.
Okay. I just want to share one, since you love the monsoon, and so do I, something that really resonated and felt beautiful was, does anyone know what rain actually sounds like? We only know the sound it makes as it falls on surfaces. Trees, leaves, puddles, roads, roofs, our bodies. It's the sound of rain meeting our world. I think that is so. I actually made many notes, and I wanted to read out so many things, but that's not fair. This is all stuff. And the other question: did you read your book as a reader after it was published? Did you go back to it? No, that was it. You were done.
No, yeah, I don't think I can enter it again. I know it like the back of my hand. I've also let it. It's been a detachment process also, because in the beginning, like Googling to see Goodreads and Amazon review, it was like, and then it was like, oh my god, I'm being crazy and this will make me insane. And every good review, of course, enjoying it still, but like, I think at some point it was like, she's a different entity, I'm a different entity. I sound crazy, I know, but it's her life. This is my life, but we hold hands when we want to. We always hold hands, but yeah, she has her life. So that's how I look at the book now, and yeah, I haven't read her since.
Okay, lastly, if you don't mind, I really found the relationship between the father and daughter deeply moving, and the fact that she gets the meal from the mess and waits for him to come. It's devastating, and that made me weep. And the other thing was Shantari's coming to the US. The book arrives, and then Shantari reappears after having disappeared into the book. I mean, what a fascinating voyage. What a fascinating, magical journey. So why did you make her come to the US? Was it to free her daughter and allow her to go back home? Or was there something else in your mind?
So, yes, definitely to free her daughter. So in the book, the first part is Bangladesh, Dhaka, and then the middle, and India. And then the middle is America, where there's no magic at all. You know, there's too much space for magic to exist between people, and there's this vastness, it's beautiful, it's actually letting you unwind and heal, and if that magic is disappearing somewhere else. But then, I think it also talks about this 9-to-5 life that we lead in US, constantly just by the clock and structure. And then suddenly this bit of magic arrives from a faraway place, which doesn't follow so much of the clock, for an unresolved emotion the daughter is carrying, the mother of Shurjo. And so she had to travel to sort of show her the parts that needed to be healed or looked at, and that's why Shantari returned. And as the father, that part is also a bit autobiographical, because I lost my father in a similar fashion when I was young. And so that was a way for me to rewrite his death, and in a way that I could let him go.
Yeah. Yes. Thank you. Beautiful book.
Any other questions?
Thank you. Actually, I just want to say something very self-centered. I know that Alonso because I lived in Denmark for a few years.
Oh.
So, yes.
Director of the Atlas.
I was wondering, is there another book in the making, and that book will it be 25% autobiographical, 50%? Because I have heard the latest Sheikh Hasina speech, and the past is not done in Bangladesh for her, definitely. So what will happen in my next book?
So I've actually stepped away from Bangladesh and history for the next book. I am working on my second one. It's about halfway, maybe even a little more. It's actually based in a place like Pondicherry, but magically written, so not Pondicherry at the same time. And so I think I had to write my bit of my past, which is Bangladesh. The present Bangladesh, I don't know if I can handle or understand. When I enter Bangladesh, I feel like I've been I've entered a jello cube where everybody's emotion is sticking to mine and mine is sticking to theirs, and I can't think clearly. It's like I can't see beyond this place. And so whenever I visit, I'm always afraid that I'll just stay in it, you know, and so I've distanced myself from that a bit. It's a very, as you know, it's a very close-knit place. You really, I think people dream in unison because you're exchanging thoughts all the time, and you know, there's just the rich and the poor and so much going on. It's magical, but also very scary in some ways for people who are sensitive. So I've stepped away from that, but magic remains in the next one, and there are characters who are inspired by maybe a place like Dhaka in this book as well. But I'm staying away from the history of it for now.
I have another question now that I know that you're writing your second manuscript. How do you feel that your spiritual life that you have been practicing for the last 5 years is influencing your writing, if at all?
It's absolutely related. I was speaking to a friend of mine the other day, and she's going through this, she's a painter, and she's going through this process of art and spirituality and trying to figure out how much of it enters. And she's scared of the word spirituality because in this modern world, often these things make you feel like you're going backward, or what are you believing in really, what is spirit, etc. For me, I got over it at some point and I accepted, and so it's the core I'm standing on really, and trying to speak from, aspiring to speak from a place where there are learnings from the spiritual life, and then that way, if I'm writing something that feels false or trying to get attention in a different manner, it is more apparent to me. It feels like lies. So to keep myself honest, the spirituality is extremely important and is definitely part of the book, which for me is a magic element.
Can you give me the... No. Is somebody else asking? Anna. What time is it?
What time is it?
7:42.
We have plenty of time. I also wanted to ask you about the writing process, because there is the story, there is the book, and then there is the craft behind it. Is there any writer who has really influenced you, who you think is an inspiration?
Yes, absolutely. So, as a child of Bengal, I mean, Satyajit Ray is, of course, there. You know, we grew up with Shurjo, his father's poetry, which is also very magical, as a Dr. Seuss of Bengal. And then his son, Satyajit Ray, and his short stories, which, you know, in Bengali, they're the best, and they're all very kooky and crazy and a little scary also, but, you know, mysterious. And so that was childhood. And Rabindranath Tagore, I didn't understand his, poetry or his music so well, short stories later on. But there was something about the language that my parents, when they listened to it, the songs, you know, that felt already like, oh, this is so like riddle-like, and you know. And as I was growing up, there would be always one Tagore song that matched the day that I was having, you know, the mood of the day, because he just is that. So that really was a big part of my young childhood to maybe teenage years, and Tagore continues to be that still to a point. And then Gabriel Garcia Marquez, 100 Years of Solitude, and even more than 100 Years of Solitude, which was so good. Chronicles of a Death Foretold is an excellent novella. If you haven't read it, I highly recommend it. It's a great book. Kurt Vonnegut, American writer, Slaughterhouse-Five, another person who, he was in the World War II and experienced it and came back and wanted to write about the war. He thought it would be very easy because he experienced it. But it took him 10 years to actually write it in a manner that made sense, with humor, with the history not being twisted, and with sarcasm to make fun of everything that he saw that needed to be lightened up. And so that was for me like, wow, someone could do this, and his voice is very strong. Jennifer Egan, who's an American writer, she got the Pulitzer for her book called A Visit from the Moon Squad in 2010 or 11. Connected stories, and it all makes sense when you read it together. She has 2 books I love, that one and The Candy House, which recently came out. Besides that, Arundhati Roy, her book definitely at that point when I read it did something to me. I haven't gone back to it, but at that age it was very powerful. Recently, I am reading now A Free Man by Aman Sethi and loving it. It's non-fiction about 5 laborers in Old Delhi, a must read. He was a chief editor of Huffington Post, which is no longer happening in India, but excellent book. And another book by Anis Salim, who is one of the people who gave me one of the blurbs, called A Blind Lady's Descendant. I loved it. It's about a small town by the sea in Kerala, and the atmosphere of it, and a 26-year-old man, a young man, his life told in first person. It's an excellent storytelling. So these are the last 2 books I've been reading, so I want to mention that. But the first ones I mentioned are the ones that probably helped a lot with figuring out what I love about storytelling.
You have written a column for such a long time. When you started writing fiction, what did you feel? And did you feel that writing a column was easier or writing fiction was easier? Which did you find?
So one of my biggest fear of writing a novel was that in a 700 thing you can be poetic and prosy and make people feel things really quickly. You just give them a little shot of something and oh yeah, you've done it. Someone walks away feeling happy or sad. But then if you can't do that in a novel, you have to be at that space, and either you can't keep somebody high all the time. You have to bring them down and make them feel different things. And I was not sure how to do that. In fact, the second part of the book is quieter and more spacious. It's in the US. It slows down a bit because the first was so intense. I felt like I myself needed that pause a bit. But still going on, moving forward, but not in the same manner. So learning that, I'm still learning that actually, how to do this without losing the reader or dropping in it, and I myself can't read pages and pages of really intense writing because it's something I can't process so quickly. But if it's a novella, yes. If it's a larger book, then no. So I'm learning the balance now. It's like the beginning of learning. Yeah.
And the usual question that everyone asks, do you have a schedule for writing? Do you say, I'm going to sit down at this time and write so much every single day? Or do you say, I'll write when I feel like, and then when I'm inspired?
So lately, the good thing about Pondichéry is that it gives you a lot of space. If you want, it's a small place. In the weekends, there are too many tourists, so you stay home. And, I think people here like their own space, so that helps. And it's gotten me into a rhythm of writing. So even in the days with my next book, which is called Easy Love, it's been good in the last few months. I think I've been writing every day, sitting down. And in the days that I thought I'm not going to write, I'm still writing, which is great. And it's usually in the late afternoons. I'm at the press in the morning, and in the late afternoons I'm focusing on that. Even if it's a paragraph, I want to sit down.
Is there anybody that, when you think you're finished, is there anybody that you pass on your manuscript to and say, please read it and give me your feedback? Is there somebody like that?
So that's a huge ask, I know friends who have done that with me, and I'm like, oh my God, because it's like your baby who's not born yet, basically. You're showing people the pictures while still years on it. It's like that, and it's fragile. So yes, I have a few friends a couple of friends. One of them is not a writer. I think that helps. to give it to somebody who's a very well-read person, and then that person can give you their opinion. And for sharing it with writers, I'm a bit hesitant, because everybody has a strong voice. I have killed a novel like that. It's like sharing it with somebody during the process, and the feedback I was getting actually made me start writing. This is in the past, in 2014. So I don't want to do that. So what I do is sometimes, if I'm very excited about something, or if I have a question, I'll send just snippets. But once it's done, then I'll think about probably sharing it. Now that I have an editor at Penguin, she's willing to read it, which I think would be the best. Then, someone I trust.
So I think I've asked you all the questions which I had in my mind. So perhaps we should wind up this evening's conversation. I think it was such a fantastic thing for us to have a published author who can give us her point of view, her experience, to tell us how the book was written, so many things that we can't know if we don't meet the author. So often I have read a book and thought, I wish I could meet that person and ask this or that. But this is the thing about books, that you write it and it goes out into the world. You don't see the people who read them, you don't get a feedback from them. You do get feedback in the sense how many copies you've sold, etc., or reviews, but you don't actually hear every single person tell you how they enjoyed it. So, or that person doesn't get the opportunity to ask you himself or herself. So this is such an extraordinary opportunity for us to have an author who tells us about her book. So I thank Iffat. Thank you so much for having come and spoken to us. I remind everybody again, if you haven't got the book, this book is available at Focus as well as on Amazon. And thank you so much for being here this evening.
Thank you, Sumena, for doing this. It's been, I think, first book of the year for your book club is an honor. Talking about this every time is different. Questions are different. I think everybody that comes bring a different aspect with them, and so I am honored and grateful. And thank you so much for this. Thank you so much.